Yeah, man. What you're looking at is an analysis that has been done by valueinvestor.com. It basically puts an argument to why Bank of America is pretty much done. It's a matter of time. I'm going to go through this article briefly to give you some highlights. I will also put a link to the information that you can use to review the article for yourself. But I have come to the conclusion that if anybody has an account with Bank of America, they should be going down to the bank immediately and withdrawing their money and closing that account. You're putting yourself at unnecessary risk, and there are many other banks out there that are in a much better position and can provide you with better services rather than to stick with this bank. Now, valueinvestor.com is basically equating Bank of America to being worthless. Okay, they have big litigation suits against them for mortgage fraud. They have moved part of their derivatives portfolio onto the bank itself, and so effectively what that does is insures those derivative contracts with bank deposits that are held by account holders. Okay, when you look at some of the moves that Bank of America is doing, it's all leading to a path of self-destruction. Okay, and so I'm going to highlight some of the things in this article. And so you know that with Basel III, they are basically increasing the reserve requirements of the bank. And Bank of America is really not in a position to raise capital. I mean, they've had a fire sale on a lot of assets. I've talked about this in the past. And now they're using accounting tricks to make it seem as if they're looking profitable. But the bottom line is that Bank of America is in dire straits. And looking at the book value and the stock value of the company, there's really no way for them to go to the equity markets and raise capital without totally diluting the shares and basically making the shares worthless. Okay, so when you look at the litigation against the bank, Countrywide is up under the gun because they have all these fraudulent loans. Okay, so it says, so now we have some context about the company being written up. Okay, and it says let's dig in, and so they say they want to talk about sustainable competitive disadvantages and potential run, management incompetence and dishonesty. They want to talk about the derivatives exposure and recent decisions to move them to the bank subsidiary. It says wanting political support, which this gets into, can Bank of America really get a bailout from the government in this political climate? They talk about countrywide mortgage litigation and recession as a risk. Okay, here they talk about Bank of America versus going to a community bank. What they're saying is that a community bank really provides the same service that Bank of America does, but they have a better relationship with their account holders. You know, when you deposit a money in a bank above FDIC limits, you're putting your faith in the solvency of the bank. Okay, and so right now Bank of America's credibility is not that high because they have all this litigation against them, and you know they've made decisions in the past that have basically put depositors at risk. Bank of America's credibility, it's in the toilet. Okay, they have a poor historical record, and the idea that Bank of America can't compete versus smaller banks in support of the company's history, Bank of America is the world of banking. People talk about how the value destroying the Merrill Lynch and the Countrywide financial deal was, but you know this issue goes back even further. It says with MBNA and with Boston Fleet, it was the same thing. It said Tim Brown had written plenty on the mesmerizing capital allocation decisions of Ken Lewis. It says that CEO had one goal in mind, and it said they're saying that his goal was basically empire building. It says sticky and cheap deposits guaranteed. It says no. It says Bank of America is experiencing the begging of a bank run already. It says although the velocity is not parabolic at this point, the sustainability of the movement is actually stronger than the cases of WAMU or Northern Trust because it is driven by sustainable, passionate hatred of the bank. Okay, so we know everybody is starting to hate Bank of America. It says not simply desire to pull one's money before others do. Some people are pulling out money in protest, and this is different. It's a difference when you're pulling your money because you think the bank is insolvent, and you're pulling your money because you don't believe in the business practices that the bank is participating in. You know, they put links, and you can check them out yourself about, you know, there's one church that pulled out like $3 million from the bank in protest of what Bank of America is doing, okay? And Bank of America, they talk about the $5 debit card fee. And it also goes into, now there's community banks that are actually offering $5 a month for people who are new customers and use their debit cards. And so community banks are taking advantage of this. And so this puts Bank of America at a further disadvantage. Okay, the next thing you got to look at is management incompetency and dishonesty. Okay, and it says back in August they said they did need capital, and I believe all of us remember that when Monahan was out there preaching to the choir, saying how Bank of America was a strong bank and how they were getting back to their core principles and that everything was good and that they didn't need money. But yet then they accept the deal from Warren Buffett, which can dilute the stock and is expensive because they got to pay him interest on his money, and he's getting more money than normal shareholders are. Okay, so that's one thing right there. Now it says they knew that Countrywide and Merrill were very bad acquisitions. How could they not? The people running Bank of America basically made a decision to buy these companies anyway, knowing full well that they were in big trouble. Okay, and it says another thing is about the dishonesty and decency. Okay, now Bank of America has delayed foreclosing sometimes for years on a large number of loans that have no realistic chance of being brought current. It says even with the loan modifications, this behavior would be irrational for an honest lender. And let me explain why. Because the reason they don't want to foreclose on these homes is because the moment that they do, they got to realize the losses. And so because they don't foreclose on these homes, they're able to kind of fluff their balance sheets, which makes the bank look more profitable. And then the people who are running this bank get bigger bonuses, okay, because it looks like they're building shareholder equity. So it's all a big roost what they're doing, okay. When you look at their derivatives exposure, it even further builds a case against Bank of America and why you need to go down to the bank and pull out your money immediately. Okay, now Moody's downgraded a holding company to Baa1 and the subbank to A2. Okay, so people that are involved in Bank of America with these derivative contracts got really nervous, and they said, you know what, homie, we need some insurance player or we're gonna have to close down these trades. So what Bank of America did was they made a decision, and they're not alone. JP Morgan did the same thing. They went ahead and took a large portion of their derivatives portfolio and they moved it on to the banks itself. Okay, and what this does, if you look at bankruptcy laws, is it gives these holders of these contracts direct access to deposits at the bank if the bank goes under. Okay, and the crazy thing about this is that the Fed was okay with this decision, but the FDIC opposes it. Now the reason the FDIC opposes it because they don't have the money to basically pay back deposit holders at the bank. Okay, in the event that this happens by law, the FDIC has to go to the Treasury to get money. Now Timmy G already said the FDIC has the full support of the U.S. Treasury. They're backed by the full faith and credit of the United States, which, if you want to call that credit, they got the full faith and access to the money printing machine. That's what they got. Okay, so in the event that there's a failure at Bank of America and the FDIC has to step in and wind down the bank and return people's money, then they're going to have to go to the Treasury to get a huge bailout package, okay, which will have to go through Congress, and they're going to have to basically make these account holders whole. In the meantime, the people that who hold these derivatives contracts will be basically taking all of the bank's assets. Okay, now this is a crazy thing because it's a big move, and it basically signals that there's some big trouble going on at the bank. Okay, now further down it says waning political support, and it talks about how the U.S. government is really not in a position to bail out Bank of America. And so you have this Occupy Wall Street movement that's growing. It's global. People are protesting. You can only imagine what will happen if news came out that the U.S. government was going to bail out Bank of America. These people are giving themselves record bonuses, constantly giving themselves plenty of cash while doing nothing to help the economy. Okay, it's like they're basically sucking up the taxpayers' money, socializing all the losses that they've taken from all this risky gambling that they've been doing. Okay, now the big elephant in the room is Countrywide. Okay, and so Bank of America, Monahan came out and threatened, oh well, we can bankrupt Countrywide, but really that's not an option for them, because when they consumed Countrywide, they took some of Countrywide's portfolio onto the bank's books. Okay, so that makes them liable, and it says right here, BAC already has a long section opinion that Bank of America is liable as well, and this is a lawsuit from AIG. And so it says, how exposed is Bank of America's tangible book of about 150 billion to litigation? And it says the 8.5 billion putback settlement that just got, basically blown to hell. And so it's probably going to be a lot bigger. Okay, so out of that 150 billion, you're going to have to subtract whatever comes out of this lawsuit from that. Okay, it says one plaintiff requested to transfer the lawsuit to federal court, and the judge now agrees because there's no analogous procedure for bonding thousands of investors and the 530 trustees to settle. Only 22 of them had a hand in the negotiation. So like I said, the line is around the corner to sue this bank. Okay, and it says a better figure is about 20 billion. Okay, if you take the 20 billion away from the 150, you got 125, 30 billion. So here it says 125, but and then it says then the HFFA sued for 31 billion. If they get 66%, that takes it down around $105 billion range. And it says then there's MBIA, there's Landsbank, there's Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund, there's a laundry list of people around the corner. And it says apart from lawsuits, the banks need to write down, say, 50 billion a second. So all these mortgages that they have that are basically in the toilet have second mortgages on them. Those are HELOCs, equity lines of credit. And this is unsecured debt. It's secured by a piece of property that is not worth what the original loan was. So you can just forget trying to get any money back from these. You can try and go after the people who opened up these things, but it's like good luck trying to squeeze water out of a rock, because if these people are out of a job and lost their home, there's no way they can pay this stuff back. They say shareholder equity will be around the $55 billion range. Okay, and it says, but with write-downs like this, the company would have to patch up its capital ratios. Now, anytime the bank takes a hit like this, they have to maintain capital ratios, and basically that's the reserve requirement against all the loans and stuff that they have outstanding. Okay, now if they have to raise capital, that means they're going to have to sell more shares of the stock. And I don't know about you, but if you've been watching Bank of America stock, it's been kind of down in the dumpsters lately. So if they got to issue more shares, you can bet your bottom dollar that the stock is going to fall through the floor. Okay, if it dilutes or doubles shares outstanding, it says per shareholder tangible equity halves. It says now they're unrealistic in the world of panic. And it says, and they have to get it from the private market due to the no bailout political climate. Okay, so they're not going to be able to go to the government and get a bailout at this point. Okay, so their back is basically against the wall, and even now it looks like the economy is slowing down. We're entering into a recession. The reports are really negative, and we're kind of teetering back and forth. The Fed is really waiting until the economy gets really, really painful before it says, okay, we're going to print more money, because it knows that there's going to be huge social and political backlash against it. Okay, Operation Twist is just a way to flatten out the yield curve and basically increase fees to banks and stuff for moving debt around from one end of the spectrum to another. The bottom line is that Bank of America is in really, really bad shape. Okay, and it's only a matter of time before Bank of America is in a position where it may collapse. Okay, and if it does, it'll be very, very bad. So there you have it. This is just more information that I wanted to share with you guys. And like I said, if you're banking with Bank of America, now is the time to go and get your money before it's too late. Talk to you players in a minute. Late.